Welcome to episode 21 of season 5. Joining me, my co-host Paul LePage.
Greetings.
We have Danny on the socials from Baltimore.
Good evening.
Guys, Happy New Year and happy Wolves rebirth, Paul. It was a nice little 2-0 win over Man U on Boxing Day and then a 2-2 draw away at Spurs. So what do you think? Vitor Pereira is undefeated in 3 games, 7 points, as many as Gary O'Neill. Did Santa deliver us the real thing or what?
It looks like it. I don't think you could have asked for a better return over the course of those 3 games. Like that Leicester win, just in terms of being at this stage of the season, an important 6-pointer. So that was a positive. United are a car crash, but they still needed beating. And they did so in a way that for large parts of that game, there was an element of comfort to it. Whereas previously, when we'd taken the lead in a Gary O'Neill game, you were never quite sure what was going to happen because it was high intensity, still stop at the back. You never had that confidence that they could look to really steady the ship and potentially see it out. And they nearly did. They nearly executed a perfect 1-0 smash and grab home win effectively. But then to add the cherry on the top was the second was phenomenal. So I think you could take a ton of positives from that one. And that even rolled in to Sunday's draw against Tottenham in that we went out there, we looked decent, we looked compact. Like everyone seems to know now what they're doing in this formation that he's got them performing in, which is a positive. And then to score early from a set piece, which from a direct free kick, I can't think of the last thing that we've even done to threaten a goalkeeper, never mind put it in the back of the net. So to have some inventiveness that came off, to see it as Wang turn into Prime Neves, it's just like that adds another puts another arrow in his quiver. So that was a positive. And even obviously there's some kinks to iron out in terms of going behind in that game. Obviously them tying it up with a set piece. And then it was pretty poor defending for their second, which we'll talk about, and probably the players involved. But they never seemed to lose heart, and that was strong. And I'd say over the course of that game, it looked like we were more like the home team in terms of dominating possession and looking threatening, and how nice it was to have positive front foot substitutions when they were needed that ultimately came off. And I generally thought with Strand Larsen's equaliser, fantastic goal, but I just had that confidence then. I thought, I'm not necessarily worried about losing late, but more positively, I've got a feeling they could go on and win it. And they may have done, but just to have that turnaround, the whole summary of the performance outlook, they're looking like a team again, seem to have some type of belief. It's phenomenal, and that's all down to the change in manager and the coaching setup.
Danny, I thought what was really interesting is normally when Wolves play Man U or play Spurs, I always feel like those teams have the more talented squad, but Wolves are, just had game plans where they could keep involved and just had those pesky players where they could pull off upsets. Especially that Man U game. I was watching that and I was like, we're the more talented team, which then goes back to how damning was Gary O'Neill's statement that, well, the players are giving their max and their max can't beat Ipswich.
Yeah, an embarrassing night probably for Gary O'Neill as well as for Man United as an institution generally. I mean, I'd watch their downfall this season, but I think until you come up against it and you're sitting in whatever we were at the time, 17th, and playing a team of Man United's at least their dollar value, let alone their potential quality. But it was like it was so stark, the difference between the way that we were playing, even against Ipswich, which like was kind of a fluky loss that probably shouldn't have played out the way that it did, but like just the fluency that we had to continue to play sort of compact and to keep things moving. Again, just kind of what we came to expect at the midpoint of last season and under Lopetegui before things went to shit. And like just that, like you said, that kind of solid Wolves shape that we had gotten used to at one point, at least.
Paul, who do you think so far has looked the best under Vitor?
The headline makers obviously stand out, but I'm going a bit left field. Someone that you might not necessarily think of first, but the job that he's done coming in, I'm going for Doherty because it's a unique position. There's this talk of having these hybrid centre-back stroke fullback that are playing either side of one dedicated central midfielder. And I think he's come into that role and has been a perfect fit right this point. Now, whether it's a long-term solution, probably not, but I think he deserves a lot of credit as a professional and someone who's over the years, and now he's certainly getting into veteran status in that he's holding his game based on his experience and his changing body probably. And I think it served him extremely well that he can take up that position and perform really admirably.
Well, hopefully he's not doing so well that Jeff Shee decides, we don't need a center back. What do you think, Danny?
Yeah, I think like to Paul's point, just to reiterate about Doherty, I think I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen him there previously. Like under even going back to Nuno, I know that we had a lot less injuries back then, but when a center back gets injured, we don't think of him as a center back because he had never played there previously, but he is one of our better headers of the ball. His aerial threat is pretty decent, defending corners or even in live play. So it's kind of interesting in retrospect to see that Nelson Semedo was always the first choice to go back there, and that's partly because he was first choice right wing back. But it's hard to make the case. He's a great 1v1 defender, but that's not the only thing that a center back does. And in fact, you could argue that if your center back is doing 1v1 defending, then some things have already gone wrong. I guess I would throw another one in. I think we've all been excited to see like fringe players come in a bit more. Rodrigo Gomez, obviously, and Tommy Doyle getting increasing minutes off the bench. But the obvious one is Andre, and we all knew that the quality that he had, and I think the jury's still out in terms of the business, the signing, and whether that was necessary or whatever. And we'll get to the silly season later and the knock-on effects of that. But in the very brief Vitor Pereira era so far, Andre's sort of been back to his best and doing exactly what we were excited to see him doing at the beginning of the season.
And Paul, I think that may be the most damning thing on Gary O'Neill's season this year was not being able to figure out how to use a starting central mid for Team Brazil.
Yeah, both of them, and as a combo as well with Joe Gomez, just because I think they complement each other so well in terms of what they can do as a duo. Now, are they going to have potentially some stiffer tests for sure, but it's pretty positive that you can put those two out there as a genuine 6 and a genuine 8, and they look the real deal. I think it spells a lot of positives going forward if you can cement that as a starting duo and then build the rest of the team around that effectively.
I will say too, Hwang not just not just on that set piece, but you could actually tell he was in the match, which a lot of time this year we weren't able to do so. He was just kind of hidden, incognito, really. Danny, who do you think really should have the most worry about their fit with the squad going forward?
I mean, I think it's like I alluded to, something we'll get onto when we're talking about January. I think I mean, it's kind of been shocking how quickly it's come around, but so odd to say that your captain at the beginning of the season would lose his captaincy and eventually be maybe on the way out. And I think Mario Lemina is sort of the big loser out of this whole shift. And it started before Pereira, but if Andre is in fact back to his best, bringing in Andre in the first place is something that really spells doom for Lemina, who's on the older side, and now we suddenly have an overload of players who are ball winners and have other talents, and Lemina can do other things, but can we carry João Gomez, Andre, and Lemina, and then Boubacar when he comes back? I know people have talked about him going out on loan, but that hasn't happened yet, and you just never know after an injury. And so it's just like, who's going to lose out on this? Probably the one who is the closest to 30.
It's just crazy because Lemina, I felt like, was the best player for Wolves last year. And now
player of the year.
yeah, it's just really kind of stunning. Who do you think, Paul, besides Lemina, that should be worried right now?
I think he's inching towards a glue fracture, I think, but it looks like it's Dawson, and that's just Father Time catching up with him. And even to the extent of getting exposed, not only in the back four, but now in the back five as well. So if he's not fitting the profile of that centre, that genuine centre back that's been talked about, with the two others on either side, I think it'll be farewell. And to be honest, I think that there might be some considerations with him around game time and everything, but I generally wouldn't be surprised if that was a somewhat of a shock January departure, that he goes somewhere on loan for game time, probably upper level of the championship, or one of the teams that's going for promotion, or trying to cement a playoff place. I wouldn't be surprised if Dawson moves on, if it's local, if it's in that in that commute time that he reportedly needs and stuff. So
I would hate that, just because again, we'd be an injury away from disaster again, even if we bring in a center back. It just, I'd be fine in the summer, but I would hope January.
I will say, I'm still holding out hope. A lot of things can happen in January, and I know we want things to happen quickly. I've already seen rumblings of, where's this center back that's supposed to come in, but there are still things to work out. And I think one of the sort of green shoots that we've seen over the first 3 games is just sort of utilizing the squad better. And that doesn't have to mean that, we see a resurgence for Dawson. I mean, as Paul says, Father Time comes for us all. But whether it's Dawson or Sarabia or Bellegarde, players who haven't really found their niche, something that I think had gotten away from Gary in a big way was just being able to use fringe players to impact games. Everything since he's left has really, to me, kind of opened my eyes a bit more to how probably set in his ways he had become not set in his ways, but choosing the same players because he felt like he could trust them, which is an understandable thing when you're underperforming. But it's just he needs to be able to use the players. There were those comments from Doyle just this week about, it feels like the players are being used, to their full potential. And it's just that's the kind of thing. It's we know the quality that Doyle has. We also know that he's young, and we just weren't getting the best out of him. Even if that means only bench appearances, we weren't getting the best out of him under Gary. So the same might be true for some of these players who might be moved on. They won't all stay, but who knows?
So that's a very good point, Danny. And I'll ask Paul this. Do you think this could be why soccer managers don't last as long in positions as other sports, because they quickly become too ingrained in their ways with the players they're using and not using the whole squad as they should?
Potentially. I think there is so much of that risk and reward and the financial implications of a relegation and everything that they want to be trusting of that team as much as possible. I think the only exception there is when you've got that genuine squad that can be accommodated from a top 4, top 6 type team playing European games during the week, where you can have that greater squad and rotate it a little more, so everyone's getting a decent share of minutes. And that's why the likes of Pep's still there, going strong. Even Klopp was an extended period, certainly compared to some of ours in most recent years. And beyond that, you rarely see, even now. My lower level league knowledge is totally dissipated, but you could usually have back in the day those teams that had managers for a good 5, 6, 7, 8 years kicking around in the Championship, League One. Even that doesn't happen anymore. So I think it's a sign of the times, just that thirst for success. And then if it doesn't happen, then the coach is the first one to go.
I feel like being a soccer coach is like one of the worst job security jobs in sports. Just, formation wise, Danny, so far we have been just kind of seeing the old 3-4-3. We've heard about Vitor's 3-6-1 that he was using in Saudi and other places. Do you think that eventually becomes a formation for Wolves, or do you think just with him coming in mid-season, he's not really going to have time to put that in?
Yeah, I think the latter. And I also think there's a good dose of like, these are kind of all the same system, just with different names. That's not entirely true, but I mean, a major tweak that we saw immediately with the way he set us up is it's, technically a 3-4-3, or you could call it a, 3-4-2-1 if you want, but it's like the midfield is much more of a box with the two defensive or holding midfielders, and then in front of them, two players who are given a lot more license. You can call them 10s if you want, but like we saw Cunha is picking up the ball basically in a left back position. Yeah. So that definition even doesn't really do it justice. And I think there's enough similarities in the players that we have to kind of keep doing that. I think the question is going to be, if players like Tommy Doyle start getting more minutes, which I think he should, and at least in the right games for it, how do we change that up, given that it's not super obvious, how you keep the same thing going with, if you put in Tommy Doyle, put it this way, who do you take out? Do you take out one of the two holding midfielders, or you take out one of the two 10s? And I don't think that it's like a straightforward answer to say one or the other. So I think he'll have to find other solutions, especially if we get injuries, or obviously I know Cunha's only out for 2 games, but I think there's going to be some shuffling around.
Well, safe to say, guys, we're midway through the season now. Our expectations, our view of the team this year has changed from the preseason. And it just so happens we did make some preseason picks in the first episode of the season. You guys ready to hear some of these?
I've already been perusing. I'm not too embarrassed yet.
Yeah. Okay. So top scorer and how many goals? Well, Paul and Joe had Cunha, which I think is going to be a thing. Although Cunha, Paul, you had him down with 12 goals, and he's already at 11? 10? Yeah, so he'll go by that. Alex and Danny had Strand Larson. Boy, oh boy, I was drinking the preseason Kool-Aid and had Rodrigo Gomez with 13 goals.
He's off the mark.
I don't think that's going to happen unless it's like a messy second half.
Yeah.
Player of the season, Paul, I could actually argue that Paul's is correct in saying Yerson Mosquera, because our defense went absolute shit once he got hurt. Me, Joe, and Alex had Mario Lamina, and that's not looking so great. And Danny with Cunha. No wonder
I'll take that one.
Goal of the year. Well, I said Rodrigo Gomez again. There's still time. Alex did as well. Paul said Cunha, and I think that's got to be the leader right now for that missile he had way outside the box. Or the goal against Man U. I mean,
yeah, or the one against Fulham. I mean, this is the problem. Continue. Tell them what I guessed.
You guessed Tommy Doyle.
So that's the thing, is I think that's a good guess, but there's such a catalog for Cunha that it's really going to take some doing for Tommy Doyle to do it. I think that he has the ability, but it's going to be tough for Cunha to lose if he has like 6 entries in the goal of the season.
Yeah. And Joe had, this is Joe from Michigan Wolves, by the way. He had Hwang, which I don't think it's going to get better than what Hwang did against Tottenham, which was good, but still not Cunha.
Yeah.
Oh, the League Cup, guys. The League Cup. Wolves actually did get 1 win and then lost in the second, or technically the third round, but their second match. I said they were going to lose in the first match, so I was fairly close. Alex said the third match they were going to lose. Joe had the quarterfinals. Danny, you had them making the semis.
Yeah, well.
And Paul had them making the final. Whoops. Now the FA Cup finish, and it hasn't started yet, and we'll get a chance to reevaluate. Paul has them going out in the third round of the FA Cup.
Yep.
Danny and Joe in the fourth round. Alex has them making the semis, and I had them winning the FA Cup. I don't think I'm going to stick with that, but we'll see.
Just so we're clear, for Paul to be right, we have to lose to Bristol. To Bristol City on the 11th.
Yikes! For EPL table finish, Paul's probably going to be the closest. He had 12th. Joe had 10th. Yikes. Danny and Alex had 9th, and I had 7th. Boy, I had high hopes, guys. I had really high hopes.
That being said, there aren't that many points between us and, I was going to say 9th, but that's not actually true. Between us and 12th, so I guess it's still Paul.
Yeah, it's still Paul. And then surprise of the season, I had Wolves signing an American and going on another U.S. tour over the summer. We'll see come January. Paul had Pedro Lima as the right back for Brazil. Which
bad.
Not yet.
I don't know about that. Alex had Hwang leaving in January or by the end of January. Could happen. Joe had a double with one of the top 6. Man, that's not going to happen. Well, I guess it could with Manchester United, right?
Oh, yeah. Well,
they won't make the top 6 this season.
But the big 6.
Oh, yeah. Big six. Big 6, I think is what he meant. And then Danny, bravo, sir. Yeah, Danny said Gary O'Neill on the hot seat end of October, and we all were kind of like, nah. Whew. What made you think that early on, Danny?
It was purely the schedule. I just saw it, and even though I was riding high from preseason, it just felt like there weren't that many wins there. I did not predict the number of losses nor the manner of them, but still, it just seemed natural that like we'd be in probably the bottom 6 at least, and obviously that is what happened, and it was even worse than that. But it was purely based on the schedule and the fact that I knew that even weaker teams were going to have a better schedule than us. So it was like very possible, as we saw, that like Leicester and Ipswich would be above us on the table, which is precisely what happened. So,
yeah, I'd say Danny did really good with this, other than the semifinals for the League Cup.
Yeah.
Overall pretty solid. Me, not so much. All right, guys. So we have a chance to refresh. So let's look again. Make your predictions now, Danny. Who will be the top scorer, and how many goals will they have at the end of the season?
So just to be clear, we're just about halfway through. Mateus Cunha is currently on 10. Larson's on 7. And then you go down to 8 Nori with 3. Guedes 2. João Gomez 2, et cetera, et cetera. So the easy guess is obviously Mateus Cunha. And the question is only how many will he score? And obviously that depends a little bit on how available he is. But I'm going to say 20 just because I think it would be great if he broke 20 goals. And I don't know how likely that is, but I'm just wishing it into existence.
Keep in mind, he has not scored on a penalty yet, right?
Yeah.
How many did Raul get in his best season? He never got 20, did he?
I thought he got 21.
I got to look back at it.
It'd been nice if that was topped.
Yeah. I'll look that up while you give your guess.
I assume, Paul, you're going Cunha as well.
Yeah, stick in, and I'll go 16.
16.
Yeah.
I had Cunha with 17 goals, so I think me and Paul are kind of in the same neighborhood. I think it would be tough to ask him to repeat exactly what he did in the first half, but he is probably the PK taker, and he hasn't gotten those yet, so we'll see. Danny, who is going to be your player of the season? This feels like another easy choice.
Yeah, it's going to be Cunha still. I'm not changing that one. So just to revisit what Paul said, in the 1920 season, Raul got 17 in the league, 27 total. But that was also, we were in Europe. So there were I think he scored 4 goals between Crusaders and whatever the other Besiktas. Yeah. So we'll say 17 was his league total. And he got a couple more in the cup. So 19. He never broke 20 for domestic competitions.
Gotcha. I like Todd from Minnesota saying 18 for Jurgen Strand Larson.
He's going to overtake him.
Yeah, well, that would be crazy. Paul, I assume you're going Cunha as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like the easy
He'll
choice.
especially be player of the season when we make him captain, but then sell him in the summer for 120 million.
Yeah.
Oh God. No. Okay, goal of the season. Danny, have we already seen it?
I think it's very likely that we've already seen it. I also think that it's not going to be anybody other than Cunha.
Yeah. I don't see that laser from outside the box. I still think that's my favorite one. Paul?
Yeah, sticking.
Yeah, sticking. Cunha all the way around. When I make my trek out to Wolverhampton, I may have to see if I can get the cowboy hat to Cunha.
Nah, not if it had that effect on Lamina. It went down.
I mean, maybe let's get him his own cowboy hat, not wearing mine. Yeah. Although I will say, Steve Bull didn't almost break his ankle in after the cowboy hat.
He'd already done that.
FA Cup finish. Paul, are you sticking with the third round?
I am, actually, just because I think this will be our typical Wolves. Can't get too carried away. We go to Bristol City and we have an upset because it's a very Wolves thing to do, is getting beaten by lower league opposition, and we haven't had it in a while. So I think we might get a decent result on Monday night and then go into that game and get found out.
Danny?
Yeah, I am tempted by that. I think I'm going to align with Paul. Not so much because I don't believe in us, but I just think Cunha's going to be out. Also, Bristol they're in 10th, so they're not entirely out of the playoff picture, but they can play a full strength team, presumably. And so I think that might be trouble.
I have a little more hope, but I'm definitely not going with the final anymore. I'm gonna say the quarterfinals. I think that's fair. Quarterfinals. Same as last year. Okay, guys, the big one. EPL table finish. Danny?
Oh, yikes. Let me just look at what I think is actually possible. So I think that there are several teams that we can do better than. I do think that we can potentially get up to where Paul originally said, which is 12th. I will hedge a little bit and say finish 14th.
14th. What do you got, Paul?
I'm going 15th. I think we'll be kicking it around with the likes of Palace, Everton, and maybe another surprise. Not so much of a surprise drop, but it may not be them. It might be a team like Brentford, or generally West Ham get suckered into more of a relegation battle, and they're in and around it as well. But I think we'll be 15th and it'll be comfortable.
I also have 15th. I think that they'll all but secure, maybe not mathematically, but all but secure that they're going to stay up when they beat Leicester City at home in late April. Okay, guys, surprise of the season. Danny, I want to hear your prognostication here.
What could be more surprising than the things that have already transpired?
I know, right?
Cunha
getting sold in January.
Yeah, that's not
That's
happening.
not mine. That's not mine, for the record.
I'm not predicting it, nor do I think it's happening. Is it enough of a surprise to say that Cunha will end up as captain for the rest of the season?
Over Semedo, huh?
I don't think it should happen, but Pereira's been dropping hints that he might be interested in doing it, and I think that we've already seen the dangers of having a captain who's very emotional. So I don't agree with it, but I think that it could happen.
Interesting. I would say that counts as a surprise. Paul, what do you think?
I'm going along with in a similar vein, but not too extended, of my Lima one, an international recognition. But I'm going to say that I might need Danny's help on the pronunciation, that Maniopo comes in and actually solidifies a place.
Oh, yeah. Bastien Mopio.
Matt Bastien Mopio. Oui, oui.
Yeah,
that he comes. Yeah, that he comes into the starting 11 at some point.
Yeah, keeps a place.
Wow.
Okay.
I mean, anything to stop us from spending money in January, you know?
I'm trying.
Yeah. So speaking of that, my surprise will be, and I don't even know, this may not even be considered a surprise. I said, other than one center back, we'll have no more additions to the first team in the January window. And that'll cause people to, lose their minds. But I don't see them going on another spending spree like they did with Lopetegui when they brought in Cunha and Dawson and Lamina. I think it's going to be one center back, and then Jeff's going to be like, cool, you got this. That's just me. So we'll revisit those at the end of the year, see if we did better than we did at the preseason. Yikes. Now, we have been talking some about the transfer window. It opened on January 1st. We still haven't signed anybody. It's okay, though. So we could probably base a whole show, guys, just on the rumors. But, Paul, there's one name that's been out there, and Liam Keane from the Express and Star has been talking about him a lot.
Yeah, again, like just having the weight behind this speculation is there's so many names kicked around, so many tiers of in the know journalist. It just seems like if Keane is putting something in writing based on a player, then there could be some substance. And it's Kevin Danso, who's a 26-year-old centre-back, plays for Lens in France, Austrian international. Talk around about possibly being homegrown as well. Came through certainly, I think Palace maybe, MK Dons Academy. So that's kicking around in there too. I think that factors into it when we're talking about the signings and opening the squad up, is that homegrown quota. So seems to check a lot of boxes, like not ultimately like young, but a good age that you could expect him to come in and be more of a senior figure. So I think that's one that we can keep an eye on.
Yeah, I know people aren't going to want to hear it, but this is exactly why they get to trot out the line of how difficult it is in January. It is genuinely difficult in January because sometimes you have things all lined up and things elsewhere in the table are just mucking it up. So just to dive a little deeper into Kevin Danso, we have one of his center back partners at Lens is Kusanov, who is someone else who was linked to us, but has also been linked to other Premier League clubs, and including City, who, as you know, are struggling to keep clean sheets. So like they're probably not going to sell two of their starting center backs in January. So like these things can be just beyond our control. You know, they can do all they want, and this can be the perfect player. But if City step in and buy his center back partner, we just might be out of luck and have to move on to someone else. So, just the usual caveats to remember that these things move very fast, and until they're holding a Wolves shirt and shaking Matt Hobbs' hand or whatever, that it hasn't happened.
For FIFA players, Danso is an 80 overall with an 83 potential. So just throwing that out there. Yeah, I mean, that's the big name. Any other names, Danny, that you've heard that maybe, or is it just kind of like, we'll see?
No, I think a lot of them fall into the category of like assorted center backs that we've been linked to, usually in this last window or sometimes in the one before. And nothing really worth commenting on because, like I said, it's all extremely preliminary at this point. I'm sure like we're going to have to do a special maybe at the beginning of next season about like how to read the transfer reports, all the different language that people use in terms of like contact and, their representatives have been talking or whatever, these things, like they're all just degrees of, someone's typed out a text message to someone else, but it doesn't mean that like there's been anything in writing or that a contract has even been drawn up or anything. So yeah, it's a kind of a usual cast of characters. There's some people who are slightly exciting, some that are less so, but it's like, again, it's not really worth like diving into when it could just be, I don't know, you pick a bunch of center backs from FIFA and we could just talk about them. It'd be the same thing. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I said, I don't want to be waiting 4 weeks, to get a center back. And during that time hearing Wolves are keen on, Wolves are interested in, Wolves are considering a bit. No. Now we are thinking Wolves are going to bring in somebody, but the outgoings could be just as interesting, Paul. We've heard Sam Johnston, maybe Tottenham, but I wonder how that would affect the homegrown quota. Sarabia, perhaps. And then the big one, Mario Lemina and there's been a couple of reports now that I've seen with him going to Saudi Arabia. What are your thoughts on those?
It's worth bringing in a no stupid question forward here because Drew Freakin was in touch on X about the subject, and he asks if Hobbs is able to sell Johnson for near what Wolves paid. Is that a win or still a disaster of a signing? And then if Lemina can be sold for near what was paid, do you do it, or have we not learned about the lesson of squad depth and Premier League experience? So I think there's merit to both of those, in that I think if you were to ship out Johnson and you get a return, some type of return on it, I think you just take it. I'm not really bothered about the profit and loss implications and amortization of his contract. If Sarr's the number one and there's some opportunity for Johnson to go, you get what you can, draw a line under it and just move on. Lemina for me is a tricky one in that I just think if there is any type of weight behind that Saudi rumor at 30, 31 potentially, that I don't think you turn that down as a player, even that you're going to go there, you're going to do 2 or 3 years, you're going to get that coin and be done with it, and fair play. But I do, to Drew's point, I would be hoping that if that's a departure, then there is distinctly an incoming replacement, and it does not need necessarily be in the same mold as Lemina, because you've got that good dynamism between Andre and Gomez, but it's someone that would be different to them two and Tommy Doyle to just offer you that difference and a little bit of flexibility within the squad.
See, that's what worries me about getting rid of Lamina. Number one, I still think he's a good guy in the locker room to have. But also, we're again just an injury or a suspension away from having depth problems again. Plus, keep in mind, we don't know if Andre or Gomez are going to be here after this summer. They could both go. One probably for sure, but maybe both. And then what? Then we're looking around for another midfielder. I don't know. I'd rather just keep Lamina. What do you think, Danny?
Yeah, I agree. I just think I see Lamina leaving as kind of a luxury. And unfortunately, I think the player is going to have a lot to say about a potential move because he's 6 months away from the end of his contract. I think that there's an option for the club to extend another year, but still, we're running the time down and he's probably not going to be offered a new one. And we're talking about potentially sort of life-changing money for him to go to Saudi. There are all these things. And just as an aside, I think the whole like him losing his captaincy and, just generally how I think he didn't quite live up to the armband. I think that there's going to be something that comes out in the future about that. I just keep thinking about it being about the 1 year anniversary of his dad's passing and just like the weight of the captaincy. And, maybe it was never meant for him. But anyway, I just think there could be more to this. And so I could imagine a scenario where he leaves and it's mostly dictated by him. As always, it's better to deal with the squad size issue without a player who's unhappy in the dressing room. And we just don't know what's going on. He doesn't seem particularly like upset or anything, but if he wants to move to Saudi for life-changing money near the end of his contract, and then we stop him because we want him to be fourth choice midfielder, that could create some bad vibes pretty quickly. So yeah, I'm sort of with you in that I prefer for him not to go just because I think finding someone with a slightly different mold, a slightly different flavor in January is just like, it's a luxury that we don't have right now. Like let's secure staying in the league and then try to reshape the squad in the summer when it's easier.
I hate it because I really like Lamina as a player too. By the way, I'm looking at this jersey that I got signed on the U.S. tour, which is signed by Pedro Neto, Mario Lamina, and Nelson Semedo, and none of those guys will likely be on a U.S. tour if it comes this summer.
Could be. There's going to be so much that happens in the next 6 months to sort of clarify these things. I mean, Semedo is another one where, I could see it going either way. He could leave this coming summer, or they could have another contract that keeps him here another year or two, just to continue to transition out. But he's been such an important part of the dressing room even before his captaincy. And it's just like, what do you do? And I kind of fall back on is now really the time to reshape a squad that is working well, even if we have to pay higher wages on a new contract, for an extra year or whatever, it might be worth it, to keep things together while we right the ship.
They'd have to be very sure that Pedro Lima is good enough to hold that spot down.
Yeah.
All right, so that's silly season. I'm sure we'll talk more about it. Due to Paul's request, there will never be another appearance from Santa Lodge, though. Don't worry, Paul. Paul's least favorite pit. So we do have a game coming up. Can Wolves stay undefeated under Vitor? It's against Nottingham Forest at 3 p.m. Eastern on Monday. Another lunch event for some of us, work meetings. So Nuno comes in. They're flying high in third place, Paul. What are we to think about Nottingham Forest right now?
It's certainly one of the surprises of the season. And I'm not sure whether you're looking at it as far as knowing Nuno, or we're looking at it from a different angle of fans from other clubs. But there's your your view of them is somewhat different. And I think there is potentially an element of not getting found out, but there's certainly an element of this is a relatively not necessarily new team, but he's constructed them in such a way this season that they're playing very uniquely. And I think it may start to get found out a little bit. And I think over time, has he got the opportunity to really either solidify a place in that top 6, top 8, maybe. I'm not sure. But at the moment, I think he's got a collection of players that I think, given their massive squad and what they've had in terms of incoming and balancing the team, I think he's put a really competitive and solid starting 11 together. And on their merits, they're pretty much there or thereabouts where they should be this season.
Danny, Chris Wood has 11 goals this year, one of them against Wolves in that 1-1 draw earlier this year. I think it's inevitable he scores, or is it?
Well, if we still had Gary O'Neill, I'd say yes, because we seem to concede from a corner every time, and that's sort of Chris Wood's bread and butter. And I mean, we weren't helping by leaving him unmarked in that game. Yeah, I mean, he has to be one of the main threats, especially with a slightly depleted squad right now. We're not going to have a new center back ready in time. Toti is presumably still going to be out, and of course, Cunha is not going to be playing. So I just think, we have. I'm sure that someone has told Vitor Pereira that that's the threat, and I'm sure that he'd be working on it. Whether that's just tell Larson that this is the guy you're marking on every corner. You do anything that you can to keep him from getting his head on the ball. But yeah, that's one of the things I'll be fretting about the whole game, I'm sure.
Paul, one of our favorite people, is coming into town as well. Morgan Gibbs White. What type of reception will he get?
I think he'll get the usual reception, but this is the element of it's not like Nuno's Wolves versus Vitor's Wolves now, because they play a different formation. He's very much a 4-2-3-1 guy now with Forest, and you got to give Gibbs White his due. He's really found his niche in that position in this team. So I think he's going to he'll come in for some stick, obviously, but beyond just Chris Wood, he's definitely got to be a player that we got to be on our guard against. I
do hate that Cunha won't play in this match, because he definitely always seems to have that edge against Nottingham Forest that adds that little jab into there. So who takes Cunha's spot in the lineup, Danny?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, fallback maybe slightly on the Spurs. Look, I think Bellegarde didn't do himself any favors in that start. I wouldn't be surprised if it was something like Hwang comes in, or sorry, yeah, Hwang keeps his spot. I don't know. I think a change of shape might happen just because of Cunha being gone, and we think we have a no stupid question related to that. In fact,
yeah. This one's bringing forward as well because it's relevant. It's our friend Matt Corliss on X, and he asked whether there's potential for Rodrigo Gomez to come in and start at left wing back and out Nuri take Cunha's place. And I think out of everyone that probably fits that free role, if you're giving like that number 10 role, giving him a free berth, picking up the ball on the left-hand side pretty deep, I think that fits naturally to out Nuri, but I don't think he's necessarily been trusted with that type of role before. Now, would it be a gamble to do it? I'm not sure. Too much of a gamble, possibly, but I'd love to see it. I really would.
It would be interesting, and Ait Nuri's price would probably go up if he could show He could play in some form of a 10 role as well. All right, guys. So let's talk about predictions then. First, let's look up Danny. You've gotten 10 points in the last 4 games.
I'm just like Vitor Pereira's resurgent Wolves, you know?
Yeah, clearly. Just very impressive, including 6 points the last 2. So Danny has 22 points, Paul. 22.
It's as good as over. Liverpool type form.
Yeah, this is like the Arsenal unbeatables, essentially. Alex is in second with 14. Paul, you have 6, and I'm tied with the guest spot with 4, which is kind of sad considering the guest spot hasn't picked the last couple games. So, Paul or Danny, I'll start with you. And first, what do you think for this one against Forest?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Todd in the chat. I'm gonna say 1-1, which is the same scoreline we had when we played them last time. They hadn't quite figured things out, and we hadn't fully fallen off the rails yet. And I think I think it's going to be something similar to that. I actually love to predict like a scrappy 1-0 win for us, but I just think with the center back situation as it is, I can't bet against them scoring against us right now.
Paul?
Yeah, that 1-1 is so appealing just based on Cunha not playing, Totti being out. So do I go with it or be really boring? Or because yeah, if Cunha was playing, I'd have gone that like 1-0 scrappy, maybe penalty type win. But I can't. So I'll go with the draw, and somehow I'll go 0-0.
0-0. Interesting. Unlike you guys, I am taking the scrappy 1-0 Wolves win. Number one, I need to hopefully get some points here. But yeah, I mean, I could see Wolves scoring early and then really in the second half taking a very park the bus type deal. Even though Vitor's shown that he goes to add more goals, I don't think that'll necessarily be the case here if they get a lead against Forest. And it's not like Nuno's teams have necessarily been able to break down high defensive formations throughout his time in the Premier League.
No Stupid Questions is presented by Esfuerzo Wines. Located just north of Santa Barbara, California, Esfuerzo Wines showcases passion and 3 generations of winemaking in every bottle. So whether you're celebrating a Wolves victory or winding down after a day at work, let Esfuerzo Wines transport you to the heart of California's wine country with every sip. For a limited time, head to esfuerzowines.com and use the promo code WOLVES for a 15% discount on your wine purchases. This message is intended for those of legal drinking age. Do not drink and drive. Excessive alcohol consumption may be harmful to your health. If you or someone you know is struggling with alcohol abuse, please seek help. Esfuerzo Wines reminds you to enjoy their products responsibly and in moderation.
It is everyone's favorite segment, so you'll hear about that again, but brought to our friends from Esfuerzo Wines. No stupid questions, and they have come in with a somewhat of a seasonal feel this week. So first up on X is Stu asking, what's the worst Wolves-related present you've ever received? Danny, I'll go for you first.
Yeah, I've received a handful of Wolves gifts in my relatively short time following Wolves. But one of the first ones is actually this T-shirt that I'm wearing right here for people who are watching us. It was just one of those where you express an interest and then your parents get you a thing. I think my mom got it for me. I can't remember if it was birthday or Christmas, but I think it was probably Christmas. And at the time, you're getting into this new thing and you're so excited about it and you want the real stuff. I don't think I'd bought a kit yet. And I just kind of rolled my eyes, and this is super embarrassing. I'm in my 30s and rolling my eyes at a gift for my mom. But it was it was just oh, this T-shirt that's from AliExpress or whatever. But actually, since then, I've just actually worn the hell out of this T-shirt. It's a really well-fitting T-shirt, and it's also fairly plain. So if I, don't want to be the person who's wearing a sports jersey out to an event where people are dressed normally, and just throw this shirt on and show show a little bit. And also like kind of nice because then like somebody will come talk to me, but it's like they kind of have to know. Whereas like even a lot of American fans of the Premier League would look at this black shirt and not necessarily make the connection. So that's always kind of nice. Is like you're at some event and someone just comes up to you and wants to talk about the Premier League.
Mine has been my wife gets me a lot of cool stuff from Wolves, but it seems like they never fit. They keep hoping that the 2X is actually going to be 2X when really it fits me like a schmedium. So yeah, I liked it at the time. This may have been bad luck too. She got Lee a Mario Lemina captain of the pack shirt at the preset that after the US tour. So
I mentioned mine before, I think, but it was 94, and it was the goalkeeper jersey that I really wanted for Christmas that I got. And it's one of those synonymous. I can always see Mike Stoll wearing it, who was the goalie at the time. So I wore it to the Boxing Day fixture. It was away in Oldham, which is a horrible place to go to. It was cold. We're on the front row. It was raining. I think we lost 4-0. Andy Ritchie, such a little shit, got a hat trick and like rubbed it in our faces after one of the goals. So it was terrible. And then the quick return fixture was at home to Sheffield United. So we'd play on the Boxing Day, and then like 2 or 3 days later it was that fixture. So got it washed and everything, was able to wear it again, and we were at home at Sheffield United and we were 2-0 down, didn't play good at all. So I left early and won this like few games, little younger, that so no chance coming back anything from this. So I left early wearing that jersey, and lo and behold, not only did we score one, but we scored two like in the 90th minute and stoppage time to equalize. So I never wore that jersey ever again.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair.
Okay, so it is New Year, and Drew, again on Twitter X, he was in touch to say what would be some of the Wolves players' New Year's resolutions. For instance, can Sarr promise to not taking on strikers one-on-one in stoppage time for the tied game, which is quite a good one.
I think one should be Aït-Nouri not losing his man in the box on really just anything, but mostly set pieces.
Yeah, I was going to go with Aït-Nouri too, and hopefully maybe he's already started on it early, which is to make the early pass. We were actually talking about it. Some of the people from Minnesota Wolves were in Baltimore for this last game, and we were talking about how he just seems to, these days, especially when he's like not high on confidence, he's like just carrying the ball a little bit too long and not realizing that sometimes the early pass is better than the right pass that you see coming later. And that's exactly what he did for the equalizer. So maybe he was getting started on it early, and that should be his resolution.
Hopefully. What's yours, Paul?
Let's that Sarr one's a really good one. I think we got to we got to try and like limit it a little better. I'm gonna do I'll do a positive one, and I want to see Santiago Bueno get a little more aggressive and start being a threat in the opposition box from set pieces and get his head on a few and score.
Okay.
Love it.
I like that one. Yeah, I like that one a lot.
And that is the No Stupid Questions for this week. And as always, thanks to our friends at Espresso Wines for their support. Please get in touch with your No Stupid Questions on the socials, which is Twitter at WLW at WLW pod, again on our Facebook page, or you can also email, and that is hello@wholelotofwolves.com.
Guys, we've had success doing the Vino for V Tour. So I propose another toast. Danny, what you drinking? You're drinking some espresso wine today.
That's right. I got one of each, and so this time it's the red blend.
A fantastic one, I might add.
Yeah.
So, guys, let's give a toast to Vitor. Unbeaten in 3 matches, 7 points out of the relegation zone. Let's show Nuno that the Wolves are back with a nice 3 points at home. Get the fans going, move further away from that bottom 3. So here's to you to Vitor.
Cheers.
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 So we will be back next Monday night directly after that Forest game to break down everything that happens and then look forward and preview that FA Cup trip away at Bristol City. So thanks to Danny on the socials, Alex producing, you, the listener, because without you, there would not be a show at all. So thank you for your continued support. If you are new to us, please head over and check out our YouTube channel as well. You can join us live each week as well. If you've yet to, please subscribe and like our content because that does a ton for our exposure. So with, again, a lot of talk about presents. So one of the things that has been a feature in our house over the Christmas period has been a certain card game. So if you're playing that card game with your loved ones, friends, or family, as you draw those cards, you can say taco, cat, goat, up the mighty wolves.